Chapter 32. They buried Arion Elisadel at first light of dawn. His brother, Pendanon, and 4 dozen of the home guard interred him in the traditional manner of the elves. At the birth of the new day, at the time of beginning, they bore him in silence to an old shaded bluff below Baen Draw that looked west over the blue expanse of the Innisbor and east across the green valley of the Sarandanan. There the firstborn of Eventine Elisadel was laid to rest. His body returned to the earth that had given it life, his spirit set free once more. They left no marker to the crown prince. Eleanor had warned that there were some among the demons who would search out testaments and prey upon the dead. There were no songs, no words of praise, no flowers, nothing to show that Arion Elisadel had ever been. There remained nothing of Eventine's firstborn but memories. Anders saw the tears in the eyes of those who gathered with him and felt that memories might be enough. Less than an hour later, the demons attacked the elves at Baen Draw. Down out of the northern hills they streamed, their screams and howls shattering the stillness of the dawn. They came as they had come at Haley's Cut, massive, twisted, dark bodies surging forward like the unleashed waters of a flood. The lower end of the draw, the elven phalanx waited rows of lancers and pikemen standing shoulder to shoulder with weapons braced. As the foremost demons clawed their way toward them, elven longbows hummed along the slopes of the Kinsrow, and the air was filled with feathered arrows. Demons convulsed and fell, buried beneath those who came after. Wave after wave of dark shafts ripped through their ranks, and hundreds died in the rush. But at last the phalanx was reached, and the demons flung themselves against it, shrieking with pain as the iron-tipped shafts pierced their bodies and held them transfixed. The attack faltered and was thrown back. Again it came, a sudden surge forward of malformed bodies, teeth and claws ripping, and again it was thrown back. The ground before the elven defensive wall grew littered with dead and dying. Still, the horde of demons pressed ahead, endless in number, and at last the elven line wavered and broke, its centre seeming to fall away. Into the breach surged the demons, bounding and leaping and scrambling from the draw. Instantly they were set upon by a body of horsemen, grey-cloaked riders with crimson trim, their leader a tall, scar-faced man on a giant blue roan. The riders swept across the head of the demon rush, lances sitting. Then they were gone, turning back into the valley, grey cloaks flying, lean forms bent low over their mounts as they galloped away. The demons gave chase in a frenzy. Moments later the riders came about, charging back into their pursuers, lances lowered, scattering bodies as they again struck and swung quickly away. The demons howled their frustration and scrambled after them. Then suddenly the grey-cloaked riders wheeled in a solid line that barred the demons' path forward, and the arm of the scar-faced man lifted, no longer massed protectively, but strung out along the grasslands for hundreds of yards beyond the mouth of the Baen Draw. The demons who had breached the elven defensive line stared about widely, seeing now what had been done to them. To either side, lines of elven cavalry burst into view, hemming them in like cattle. Behind them, the breach had been closed by a tall black-robed figure, standing atop the lower slopes of the Kinsrow with fire spurting from his outstretched arms to scatter the demons who milled uncertainly within the draw. Desperately, those trapped without sought to break the line about them, but the elves converged quickly, sword and lance cutting apart the black forms that reached up for them. In moments, the whole of the demon advance had been destroyed. Through the length of the Baen Draw, the elven cry of victory echoed. It did not end there. For the remainder of the morning and into early afternoon, the battle raged on. Time and again the demons massed for a rush on the elven phalanx that barred passage through Baen Draw. Time and again they broke through, battling their way past elven archers and druid fire, past lancers and pikemen, only to find themselves face to face with the grey riders of the Legion Free Corps. Teased and harassed, they gave chase. Heedless of what lay ahead, they allowed themselves to be drawn on, sometimes toward the shoreline of the Innispore, sometimes toward the slopes of the Kinsrow, or into the valley of the Sarandanan. Then, when it appeared that they had caught the elusive horsemen, they found themselves encircled by elven cavalry, their own ranks thinned and unprotected, their thrust having carried them far from those brethren who battled still within the draw. Raging, they threw themselves at their enemy, but there was no escape. The elves swept back, and again their lines closed across Baen Draw. For a time, the demons sought to gain the slopes of the Kinsrow, thinking to put an end to the hated longbow, but carefully placed their ranks deep and sheltered within the rocks. The elven archers cut to pieces those who tried to reach them. In their midst stood the black-robed giant, sorcerous fire lancing from his hands, his awesome power sheltering the elves who struggled below. All forms of demons tried to reach him, demons that burrowed within the earth, demons that flew, demons that scaled cliff walls like flies. All failed, all died. In one attack, the demons smashed through the elven phalanx, who had boarded the shoreline of the Innispore, turning it back across the draw as hundreds of attackers swarmed over the sand-swept hills toward the open valley beyond. For a moment it appeared that the elven defensive line was finally broken, but with a valiant effort, the cavalry converged east of this new advance and rode into it in a charge that drove the demons back into the waters of the Innispore. Again the evil ones could not mass, but were strung out along the beachhead. Their backs to the lake, the attack faltered and broke apart, shattered on the lances of the elves. The breach closed one more time. Thousands of demons died that afternoon in senseless, mindless, savage rushes through Baen Draw. They attacked ceaselessly, surging forward on their race to the cliffs with the blind determination of lemmings, oblivious to the destruction that waited. Elves and bordermen died with them, caught up in their frenzy to break through to the Sarandanan. Yet the rout that had occurred at Haley's Cut was not repeated this day. Time and again the demons were thrown back, the forefront of their assault destroyed before it had an opportunity to gain reinforcement from the masses that came after. Finally, in mid-afternoon, the demons launched their final attack. Massing within Baen Draw, they surged against the elven phalanx, bore it backward by sheer force of numbers, and snapped it apart. Into the seams they poured, and suddenly there was no time for carefully wrought tactics, all for skill and finesse. The elves and the legion struck back, their horsemen charging into the midst of the onslaught, sword and spear cut deep into the tangle of twisted dark forms below. Horses and riders screamed and went down. The lines of the fighters surged back and forth desperately, but at last the demons broke, snarling and clawing as they fled back into the draw, streaks of anger rising from their midst. This time they did not turn. They continued on, trampling through their own dead and dying, hobbling and crawling and scrambling into the hills beyond until Baen Draw stood empty. The elves stared after the retreating forms in weary disbelief, watching as the last of them disappeared into the curve of the hills, the sound of their passing fading slowly into silence. Then the elves looked about them and saw clearly the enormity of the struggle that had taken place. Thousands of tangled dark bodies lay scattered across the grasslands, spreading east out of Baen Draw from Kinsrow to Innispore, still and lifeless and broken. The draw itself was massed thick with them. The elves were appalled. It was as if life had meant nothing to the demons, as if death was somehow preferable. Eyes began to search out the faces of friends and comrades. Hands stretched out to one another, clasping tightly, and the elves were filled with relief, grateful that they had somehow survived through such terrible destruction. At the head of the draw, Ande Lesidel found Kael Pendannon and impulsively hugged the veteran soldier to him. Cries of elation began to rise from the throats of their countrymen as the realization set in that day was theirs. Stejans rode in at the head of the Free Corps, and the bordermen joined the elves, lancers, raising in salute. Down the length of the Sarandanan, the roar of victory swelled and echoed. Only Alanon stood apart, alone now on the slopes of the Kinsrow, his dark face turned north toward the hills into which the demons had so abruptly fled. He found himself wondering why it was they had been willing to give their lives so cheaply, and perhaps more important still, why it was that through all that slaughter there had been no sign of the one they called the Dag Damor. The afternoon faded into dusk and the night slipped silently away. At the mouth of Baen Draw, the army of the Westland waited for the demons to attack. But the demons did not come, nor did they come at dawn. The elves and bordermen stood ready once more. The morning hours began to creep past, and a growing uneasiness pervaded the ranks of the defenders. At midday, Ander went looking for Alanon, hoping that the druid could give some explanation for what was happening alone. Alone he climbed the slopes of the Kinsrow to where Alanon kept a solitary vigil within the shelter of an outcropping of rock, half hidden in shadow as he gazed out across the Sarandanan. The Elven Prince had not spoken with Alanon since yesterday when the druid had come up into these mountains. No one had. Caught up in the jubilation of the Elven victory over the demons, he had given little thought to the druid's going. After all, Alanon came and went all the time, seldom with any explanation, but now, as he approached the druid, he found himself wondering, nevertheless, why Alanon had chosen this time to be alone. He was given his answer the moment the druid turned to face him. Alanon's face, once so dark, was ashen. Harsh lines creased the skin, giving it a slack and weary cast, and there was a brooding look to the piercing black eyes. Ander drew up short, staring. The stare brought a faint smile to Alanon's lips. "Does something trouble you, Elven Prince?" Ander started. "No, it's just that... Alanon, you look..." The druid shrugged. "There is a price for the ways in which we use ourselves. This is one of nature's laws, though we often choose to disregard it. Even a druid is subject to its dictates." He paused. "Do you understand what I am saying?" Ander looked uncertain. "The magic does this to you?" Alanon nodded. "The magic takes life from the user. It drains strength and being. Something of what is lost can be recovered, but recovery is loss, and there is pain." The sentence died away, unfinished. Ander felt a sudden chill. "Alanon, have you lost your magic?" The cow head lifted. "The magic is not lost while the user lives, but there are limits that cannot be exceeded, and the limits shorten with the passing of the years. We all grow old, Elven Prince." "Even you?" Ander asked quietly. The black eyes were veiled. Alanon changed the subject abruptly. "What brings you to me?" Ander took a moment to recover his thoughts. "I came to ask why the demons do not attack." The druid looked away. "Because they are not ready yet." He was silent a moment, then his gaze shifted back again. "Do not be misled. They will come. But they delay, and there is purpose behind that delay. The one who leads them, the one who is called the Dag Damor, does nothing without reason." He bent forward slightly. "Give thought to this. The Dag Damor was not among those who attacked us yesterday." Ander frowned worriedly. "Where was he then?" Alanon shook his head. "The question we should be asking is, where is he now?" He watched Ander for a moment, then drew the black robes close about him. "I have been thinking that it would be wise to send trackers north above the Kinsrow and south below the Innisboard to be certain that the demons do not intend to flank us." There was a long silence. "Are there demons enough to do that?" Ander asked finally, thinking of the thousands that had come against him already at Baen Draw. Alanon's laugh was brittle. "Demons enough." The druid turned away. "Leave me alone now, Elven Prince." Ander went back down out of the Kinsrow. Riddled with doubt, on his return trackers were dispatched, and the waiting resumed. Morning passed into afternoon, and afternoon into evening. A heavy bank of clouds rolled across the darkening sky, and shadows lengthened quickly into the night. Still, the demons did not come.